Hello, welcome back to my channel. My name is Jackie Thompson for those of you who don't know me, and in today's video I'm going to be talking about the statistics of women in the workforce, how to identify sexism and different forms of sexism, my personal experience with sexism, and then lastly I'm going to talk about ways to deal with sexism and resources you can go to if you are experiencing sexism. So let's get to it. So before we get started, I just want to say that, as always, I have links and articles down in this description below, and I highly recommend you going and checking them out. Okay, so for the women in the workforce statistics, I'm going to just do a quick breakdown of that because I did a whole entire video of women in STEM statistics that you can go watch over here. Gender difference in the workforce, 52% is men and 48% is women. But even though the gender difference in the overall workforce is almost 50-50, that doesn't mean that women still don't experience sexism on a day-to-day basis. So now on to the second part of the video, which is how to identify sexism and different forms of sexism. Sexism is the prejudice and discrimination based on sex or gender, especially against women and girls. So this can come across as sexual harassment and catcalling, and sexual harassment is obviously inappropriately touching women or touching women without their consent. Women in the workforce have complained about how men usually touch their lower back or their shoulders when passing by or just kind of randomly. That is unnecessary, but this makes women feel uncomfortable. Men don't go around touching other men on their shoulders or their backs, so why is it that men always do this to women? This is a form of sexual harassment, and if you are a male and you're watching this, be more aware of how you're acting and what you're physically doing when you're around other women in your workplace. Also, another thing that women said that bugged them a lot in the workplace is how men would invade their personal space. So if they're showing them something on the computer and they're reaching over and just crossing that little bubble and just being too close to them, that makes anyone feel uncomfortable. So also be aware of that. If you're by someone, be conscious of how close you're getting to someone. Not everybody enjoys being super close to each other, especially if you guys are just co-workers. It can be a very awkward situation, and you're putting the women in an even more awkward situation because they are the ones who have to deal with this. Another form is gender stereotypes at work and at schools. And gender stereotypes are how society expects people to act based on their gender. Like the huge stereotype that women are supposed to stay home and cook and clean and care for children versus how men are supposed to be the ones providing for their family and going to work and not doing any of the housework. And if you don't adhere to these stereotypes, then you're judged based off of that. But this really impacts young girls, especially when they're trying to figure out what they are going to be when they grow up. They have this idea of some things that are feminine and some things that are masculine, which is just gender stereotypes. Another form is objectification and poor representation of women. Objectification is when a person is treated as a commodity or an object without regard to their personality. This occurs a lot in media when women are photoshopped and airbrushed, leading to a lot of emphasis on their external appearance. Women are usually poorly represented in entertainment, such as TV and movies. They usually are in roles that reinforce gender stereotypes. Then we have forms of microaggressions and macroaggression. Macroaggressions would occur at systemic levels, such as the gender pay gap, which is when men get paid more than women do for the same exact job. And although this has gotten better over the years, there is still that pay gap. Now, microaggressions is a little more difficult to see. Microaggressions are indirect or unintentional expressions of sexism or racism and can come from well-intended people. And this can include sexist language, sexist humor, insults that are derogatory, sexual objectification. And this is just a way that some people speak where they're doing these microaggressions, but they don't even realize it because they're not really perceiving and really analyzing what they're saying. They're just talking. So some examples of microaggressions is when women have the same behaviors as men, but the description of their behaviors is described differently. So like labeling women bossy, drama queens, or too sensitive, versus men would be labeled as assertive and knowledgeable. Another example of microaggressions is underestimating women, not believing in their skills and their intelligence level, and not believing that they can be in a certain position that they're in, or even thinking that they're not capable of doing certain tasks. So now on to topic number 3, which is my personal experience with sexism. I would say I didn't even realize I had experienced sexism throughout my life until I got to my university. And when I had experienced blatant sexism, and that's when I started to realize, like, oh wow, I actually have been experiencing sexism my entire life and I didn't even know. And the way that the sexism occurred to me was in my lab. We were all discussing ways to improve the lab and the lab space because we didn't have a lot of room, a lot of storage room, and we had to figure out some logistical stuff. And I kept offering ideas, and this grad student that I worked with, he kept blatantly ignoring me and talking over me and would refuse to listen to my ideas, which was extremely frustrating, and it was so ridiculous. And all my ideas we ended up implementing in my lab anyways, so I don't know why he was just being. But even after I experienced that, I was like, okay, whatever, it's probably just because he's just a jerk and that's just how he is, so whatever. But then the situations with that specific individual continued to get worse. And one specific moment that I remember is we were all in lab, or a lot of us were in lab anyways, my other lab mates, and I was doing my own research stuff that I had to do, so I was taking care of my stuff. And he was talking to a couple of other guys, and he was just talking about his romance life and his dating life. And he had the audacity to say that women will only get with men if they know they have a successful and stable job and they have good income, so that they know that they can be taken care of and won't have to work or do anything. When I heard this, I was extremely mad. I could not believe he would say that just because a girl didn't want to sleep with him. Like, are you serious? There might be something else versus, you know, it's not just because you're a college student is why someone wouldn't want to date you. Like, have you met yourself? He did not have the best personality. So this is when I stepped into that conversation, because I was not just going to let him put down women like that when we had 3 women in the lab. I was like, that is not okay. I'm not the person to stand by and not say anything. So I started to confront him, and I was like, you seriously think that's all women want, is just to be taken care of so they don't have to work? Are you serious? There are so many women who do not want or need a man to take care of them, and they are perfectly fine on their own. A lot of women nowadays also are trying to fall out of that gender stereotype that women have to stay home. I was trying to have a conversation with him, but he was getting mad and saying more sexist stuff, and so I was getting mad, and honestly it turned into a huge argument. Like, we ended up yelling at each other. Probably all the labs down the hall could hear us arguing. Some people, one guy in the other lab even came by to see like what the hell was happening. It was horrible. It was a horrible situation. It was so infuriating. I was so pissed off, and so was he. It was just horrible. What shocked me the most was that the other women in the lab didn't even back me up. They literally said nothing at all. Versus the men in the lab, I actually had one guy who was on my side and was backing me up, and then the other men were backing up the other guy. It was just a very interesting situation, and it made me open my eyes to realize a couple of things. One, I didn't even know that much about sexism to begin with. I never had really experienced it until those moments. So I wanted to learn more about it and educate myself and figure out why was it that these women weren't saying anything and just letting this happen. And I get not a lot of people are confrontational like myself. So after I started researching it, I began to notice every time I had experienced sexism from then on. And then I also recognized some common themes in the past where I had experienced sexism. Another time I was sitting with a group of people, and I was, you know, giving this one guy an answer, and he literally refused to believe what I was saying. And I was like, I know what I'm talking about. This is the answer, I guarantee you. I literally had to turn to the page in the book where it said exactly what I was saying so that he could believe what I was saying. Another time was when I worked at a deli shop. He was either my shift supervisor or my manager. I don't quite remember like what position he was in, but I do know that he was in a higher position than me. He would always say weird comments, and they would usually always be sexual, or they would always be about my sex life. And it was just really awkward for me because I was not interested. He just was so persistent, and at that time, that was when I didn't, like, I knew I was experiencing sexism, but I didn't like fully know I was experiencing sexism. I just knew something was going on and it was making me uncomfortable, and I didn't really know how to go about it or what to do. But I just know that he was making inappropriate comments, and it made me feel so weird, and it made me not want to work with him because I always felt awkward. And he would do this same thing to like almost all of the girls who did work at that deli shop. So now on to my fourth topic, which is how to deal with sexism and different resources you can go to if you are experiencing sexism. So how to deal with it personally, I still have troubles dealing with this because I speak out, just like I've gotten into so many countless arguments because of this sexism, and I don't let shit slide by. It really infuriates me and it makes me mad, and it makes me even more mad that other women don't stand up for themselves. But I understand that not everyone is confrontational, like I said earlier, and I understand that some people just don't like to do that, which is fine. That is usually why I step in. But if you are the type to speak out, then I highly suggest speaking out when things are happening. Enlighten people when they're being sexist or making sexist comments, and tell them, call them out on their shit. Don't let them do that to you. Don't let anybody treat you like that, whether it's sexism or racism, whatever it is, whatever stereotype. Even if it's your close family and friends. Another thing you can do if you don't want to necessarily speak out when people are being sexist to you is you can support other campaigns, support other people who are going through it, who experience it, and listen to people. But I will say, you can't fight every battle. You know, if you experience sexism a lot, then it can be draining to continuously fight with people. I felt that during my time at my university. It was extremely draining, and I had to get to a point where I ignored them and I brushed them off. Even though I feel the need to stand up, sometimes I just did not have the energy to do it. And that's okay too. You don't have to fight every battle. Keep in mind your surroundings, because you might not be in an ideal situation, or you might be in contact with a stranger and you don't know how they're gonna react to you, or what they're gonna say, or what they're gonna do. So always keep in mind where you're at, your surroundings, and who it is you are talking to. Resources. Every school and workplace has an HR department that you can go to specifically talk about discrimination, sexism, racism, to figure out what your next steps can be and how you can report this. For schools specifically, I know a lot of campuses, and like my campus, Sacramento State, had extra specific offices that you could go to if you were experiencing sexism or racism, and they actually had specific counselors for you to talk to figure out what you wanted your next steps to be, or if you just simply wanted to talk to someone about what you were experiencing. Another thing you can do if you're feeling that you need to talk to someone about what is happening is you can talk to your PI. That's what I did. I talked to my PI from my research lab and told him what was happening in the lab. I also talked to another professor that I had. I needed someone that I could connect to and that could understand my experiences, and so I went to another mentor of mine, and she is also a minority and a woman, so I was able to really connect with her and really share my experience that I could simply just confide in. I felt so much better once I talked to my professor. She was extremely helpful, and I am still so appreciative that she took that time to just listen to me and let me vent. That is it for today's video. Thank you all so much for watching. If you have experienced sexism, comment down below and let me know, or you can private message me. This is my Instagram. You can follow me there. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and click the bell to be notified every time I upload a video. I will see you all next week. Bye!